Welcome back, folks, to the DFREE Wealth Lab. And as I've said in many occasions, a laboratory is a place where you explore and you discover. But the DFREE Wealth Lab is not just about discovery, but hopefully motivate you to take action. We are focused this month on financial literacy, but we're always focused on financial literacy. And for the last 21 years, I've been focused on helping people under the banner that we call DFREE. There are bad D's and good D's. I had to get out of the bad D's, which are debt, delinquencies, and deficit living, so that I could get into the good D's of making deposits in my own account, having my name on a deed for real estate that I own, and earning dividends from my investments. And one of the things I have concluded is that if I'm not careful, I will fall into the trap of making wealth creation seem to be solely an individual pursuit. When the reality is that the companies where I serve on boards, we have stockholders and investors. And the people that I know who have been the most successful have teamed up with other people. And so I want to begin focusing much more than I ever have on not just starting businesses, but buying businesses, not only achieving individual wealth, but having collective wealth. And I'm not talking about everybody in the world. What I'm talking about is two or three people from time to time pulling together their resources, their assets, and becoming owners together. And thus, the guest that I have today is someone who not only has done what I'm talking about, but has created tools that not only teach people, but facilitate people actually not only creating wealth, but protecting their assets and leaving legacies. So Bobby Van Buren is from Atlanta, but he's really everywhere. He's in Las Vegas and he's all in California. But Bobby, I'm so happy to have you. I think your company is called Insurance Gurus.
Yeah,
And,
the insurance gurus.
and what I love about it is that you are not the founder, you are a co-founder, which
Yeah,
means
that's
that
right.
you did
That's right.
exactly what I'm talking about. You didn't
Yeah,
fly solo and you don't fly solo. So
yeah.
thanks for being here. And I really want you to talk about, first of all, what you do, and then let's zoom in on how important commerce is, entrepreneurship, business, and how insurance is key to business success.
Well, I hope we got about 3 hours because you get me talking about stuff I love. But yes, my business is called the Insurance Gurus. We have a co-business called the Four Horsemen. And it's not the biblical four horsemen. It was, everybody asked about that, but it just happened to be four of us that pulled our business together so that we could create a bigger network than what we could do ourselves. Our limitations, singular, just like you had talked about from a business perspective, owning businesses, we were greater together than we were separately.
How did you
So
do? I mean, what are the mechanics involved? Four guys or four people, I don't know if it's all guys or not. Four people decide we're going to do this together. I mean, what's the nitty gritty
Well,
involved?
here's that. That's a good question. Um, we all owned individual agencies, but we found that carriers, the larger carriers that would insure properties and the type of properties we wanted to go after, would only give us business if we could show that we did a certain amount of business.
Mm,
So we looked at our book of businesses and said collectively we're stronger than we are individually. So we were the horsemen and they were their own company names. And we created and we were the gurus and we created the four horsemen because we brought all four of us together. We combined our books into one. And
man.
then what we do is we sell business together. So if I can't do something, they can do it. Right. And we partner on doing it. And so it just made us stronger. It allowed us to get into bigger deals, bigger opportunities that we couldn't get individually. And it allowed us to get the carriers that we couldn't get individually. So
Man,
we became stronger.
you could stop right there because whether it's a barber shop, beauty
Yes.
shop, construction company, we have got to begin thinking much more about doing exactly what you're saying. Even churches. Listen, I've been in communities where there are five little bitty churches within walking distance of each other, and collectively they could become a real viable institution.
Yes.
And
Yes.
folks, this is so important. People are angry and upset, rightfully so, because of the dismantling of DEI and the rollback and affirmative action. What I'm telling you folks is that the way we have made it to this point is that what Bobby's describing used to be normal for us. And then somehow we integrated into this myth of rugged individualism and every person for themselves, and it's not working for us.
Yep.
And Bobby, your business is working.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that.
Well, we not only share the wealth opportunity, we share the liability.
Right.
That's a big thing. When something goes wrong, again, we share that liability. So it takes less pressure off me individually if I can share it with 3 other people.
Well, it also means that you have to trust each other.
Yes.
Because you vet each other. You don't want more liability than you should share because of a weak link in the 4 horsemen.
Yeah. Well, it's like minds and a good contract. I don't discount the contract because we write everything down. So it's like minds and a good contract.
So when I met you in Atlanta, I think I mentioned to you that I didn't understand the importance and significance of insurance on a business until I was on a committee at a bank that would not lend money to small businesses if they were inadequately insured. So let's talk about why insurance is so critical and the kinds of commercial insurance anyone needs to understand before they either own a business, buy a business, or start a business.
Yep, that's a great point. A lot of them will start a business because without having to go to the bank first, right? It's when you have to go to the bank and show assets and things that the bank really isn't going to require you to have insurance, and the bank will force majeure insurance on you if you lose it.
Right.
What we find that I don't care whether it's a restaurant or a hotel, anybody that goes for financing on a business, the first thing they're going to ask to do, they don't want to know, do you have insurance? They want proof you have insurance. So those are the calls I get. And when I'm dealing with new business owners or about to be business owners, the first thing, they want to know is how much is the insurance. And before I can tell them how much it is, I said, we got to determine what your needs are, right? Because the worst thing that happens is they get the minimum amount of insurance instead of what insurance they need. And then something happens and they find they're underinsured. And that's when they come yelling, but it's too late. So, there's the liability is the general thing everybody thinks of. If something goes wrong, that general liability, but general being the term there, general doesn't cover everything. That's the baseline, right? It's whether you're going to own the property or whether you're going to lease the property. It's whether you're going to have employees tied to that property. The liability can extend through multiple parts of the business. A lot of, when I talk Black businesses, a lot of them start, most businesses we have are restaurant and daycare centers. But when I start doing commercial properties, that's when I see the biggest value, and they're the biggest liability, right? Because, the cost of the buildings, the number of buildings, how many people you have in the buildings, how many floors do you have? So it gets detailed, and so I try to be personally involved whenever we do with dealing with groups, which I love to do, because again, that shared liability, shared thoughts, shared mindset. We sit down and just talk about the needs first. That's the first thing. Then I'll give you that quote. We'll decide, make sure, and certain loans require you to have certain types of insurance that you normally wouldn't have, whether it's an umbrella insurance policy, which are extremely important, even on the personal side. Whether, if you're putting that much money into an asset, protect that asset, right? If something goes wrong, you don't want to just being able to rebuild it. You got to make sure you're getting everything you put into it plus more.
Yeah. So many, you're saying so many things that require explanation. You know this stuff in your sleep. But
you're right.
A term like umbrella insurance requires some explanation. But before we go there, let's go back even further, just rewind and talk about the needs. My experience, my personal experience is that my insurance broker from my business pointed out needs to me that I didn't know I had. So if I come to your office and you say, what do you need? I would have told you what I need based on my perspective. But I've learned that it takes someone like you to really tell someone like me what I need based on what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so many times insurance agents sell to a cost, a premium, right? So you have a target of what you want to spend, and that's not the proper way to insure. So when I ask you your needs, I want to know about your business first. What are you buying? Who's in there with you? What is your risk, right? How big is the building? There's a lot of factors that go into play to decide what your needs are. And I
Yeah.
can speak from experience of, hey, we do a lot of commercial property. This customer over here has had this issue, right? And that might be by a zip code issue. And when I say that, is certain parts, depending on, I'll use city of Atlanta, for example. The infrastructure in the city of Atlanta is different than the outer suburbs, right? Older pipes, older neighborhoods. So when you buy in that building area, they look at that infrastructure, and that's tied to your zip code. So your rating is higher. Your rating may be different than it is in the suburb. So I want to know, what the infrastructure looks like in the area you're in. So that's the first thing I'm looking at. One of the first things I'm looking at. Then we look at the type of risk you have based on whether it's a building or a business. And then the type of business also makes a difference, right? If you're in the hospitality, buying a hotel that you're fixing up, or if you're buying an apartment complex that you're going to rent out, or if it's a business office building, every one of them have a slightly different risk. And that's usually what the first thing we're trying to find out is your level of risk. And then we go to the type of policies you'll need for coverage.
Yeah, that's great. Folks, this is Bobby Van Buren. He's a specialist in all kinds of insurance. I've asked him to zoom in on commercial insurance, mainly because we're emphasizing entrepreneurship, business ownership, business development. And unfortunately, too many conversations around business leave out the issue of insurance. And my experience is that that is central to effective business and business development. Now, you mentioned umbrella insurance. I have an umbrella policy. Describe why it's important because of what it is.
Yeah, I love umbrellas. What an umbrella does, twofold. But if you think of an umbrella as something covering you in the rain, right? So the umbrella is that overhang of insurance that covers you when your baseline, your general liability, your property insurance reaches its pinnacle, right? So let's say you have $2 million in coverage. If something happens and you're liable or you get sued for 4 million, that first 2 million goes to your baseline coverage. Then that umbrella kicks in. The umbrella covers you from that 2 million to the 4 million or whatever your limits are. That's that overhang of business. That's that extra coverage. Not only does it cover you, usually it will help you. There's a defense cost. So
Right.
it'll pay for that lawyer from that point on up to that, whatever your limit of coverage is, that umbrella. And excuse me, because I talk with my hands, but that umbrella coverage is that extended coverage that covers you over and above your general coverages.
Right. So I was sued one time by someone, and the suit was unrelated to the business that I do, but
Hmm.
it was a suit nonetheless. They sued my business and they sued me personally. And my umbrella policy kicked in, paid the lawyers. In fact, in that instance, I actually chose the lawyer myself.
Yeah.
Often the insurance company will send you a lawyer, but in
Yeah.
that instance, I chose the lawyer and was very successful and never had to pay a dime. Now, you started answering this question, but I want you to go a little deeper. And here's the question: what determines how much my premium is on a particular type of insurance? You mentioned infrastructure, but there are other factors that contribute to the decision on how much I will pay. So two
Yeah.
people may have two different premium amounts
Yes.
for a very similar, if not the same
Yeah.
policy. What
Very good point. Very good point. Location has a lot to do with it, right? Location probably is number one. Then it's the type. There's so many different areas of commercial insurance that you can go into. The type of business, the risk. They look at your risk. So there's only certain companies that will do certain time. I
Mhm.
do a lot of hospitality. I do a lot of commercial property. Those are two different things. So the risk on the hospitality is different than commercial property. But
Right.
anytime there is a human factor involved, like bodies, right? If you're a commercial building you're buying and you have tenants, that's that human factor, right? If you have a restaurant or you have a hotel, that human factor comes. That is a good determination of rate. right? That risk level. And then the other that people forget about is credit. Credit plays a big part of that, right? And you have your personal credit and your business credit, and they carry over. And sometimes it's not just with your loan, but insurance, even on your personal side, credit makes a difference. And it's becoming more and more prevalent in how they rate you is your credit. And it's your insurance history plays into your credit history. It's not that credit you see when you go get a loan. It's that insurance credit. Have you had insurance? How long have you had it? Have you had gaps insurance? So if you have a insurance policy but you forget to pay it and it went 10 days, believe me, that shows up in your history and it
You know,
determines your rate.
it's so funny, folks. I just met Bobby just a few weeks ago, but when I met him, what happened was that his conversation, when I listened to him, I felt like I was listening to myself, and not just in content, but in flow. I was literally getting ready to ask you the question that you answered already, and that was, how does your personal financial status factor into
Yeah.
your insurance premium? You answered the question. It's just amazing that we think so much alike in terms of thought process,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now I'm going to flip the switch on you, all right? Because I didn't tell you we were going to talk about this, but I want to close with this. This is very important. You are in the business of mitigating risk through products for other people's businesses. Suppose I want to get into the business you're in. What about those people who may have been downsized from their jobs, people looking for a different career, people who are thinking about getting into the insurance business? What are 2 or 3 things you have to say by way of advice for
Well,
them?
that's good because I was in IT consulting sales before I got in insurance, and I didn't see myself as an insurance salesperson. But once you do sales, you understand the process.
Hmm.
I just got a passion for it because something personal happened to me that made me think, oh man, I didn't know this at the time. Um, Insurance is a thing that it's personal, right? You can go work for anybody. You got to get licensed now. That's number one. And if you have a certain history or background, getting licensed gets harder and harder, right? It's different if you've had anything in your background that might be a felony, so to speak. They regulate that, so it's very hard to get a license. But anybody can get licensed and go to work. Usually, you want to start with one of the general standard companies, what we call captive companies. But then you get a chance to specialize even with them and go into, I like the commercial side. I have some passion for the life insurance side. There's that just brought me together with my business partner who was the same and like mine. And so we got an opportunity after spending 10 years on the captive side. That's where we said, okay, we could do more on the individual side, on the commercial side, and that's where we went this way. And I want to make one other point. I want to, because you touched on something I forgot to say. Partnership. The biggest thing you could do when you're vetting partnerships, and I don't care if this is it from a business standpoint, if you create partners, I do a lot of life insurance for business partners, and that is key because I had a situation. I want to always tell a story where one of the partners, 2 law firms, right, came together. They were partners. There were 3 partners in the law firm, so I did life insurance on each partner, and one of the partners didn't complete the life insurance,
Hmm.
and he passed away. His wife inherited his part of the business, but she didn't have a law degree, so she could bring no value to the business. Had that life insurance got completed, the life insurance would have bought her out. That's what the policy would have been for the business ownership, key man insurance, they call it. We would have bought her out. That way they could have continued business, hired somebody, either brought another partner or just kept it between the two. And from that day on, right after that happened, they always first thing they did was make sure that once she sold that piece of the business, they brought that partner in. We got life insurance on him, and that's important. That is key to maintaining the business because everybody doesn't have the same amount of equity when you come into a business. So that's important. So I just want to throw that out there.
So Bobby, in that instance, because that is important and very few people even talk about it in public, but in that instance, are you more likely to sell a term policy for a partnership or a whole
No.
policy?
It depends on the business, right? So if it's a lot of times when I sell term to a business, it's tied to a loan, right? If they go get a $10 million loan, the bank requires them to have a $10 million life insurance. That's usually when I sell term, right? But I can sell it if it's a short-term business. They're building this business to go sell it in 10 years, then we might do a term. Otherwise, it's typically a permanent insurance, and it's owned by the business, paid by the business. Unfortunately, you cannot write off, from a tax standpoint, but it's paid by the business. The business is the beneficiary, and the business has control of it. So the business can say what they do with that money if one partner dies. And usually that's written in a contract when we do it as well.
Great. Folks, listen, Bobby asked for 3 hours. We don't have 3 hours.
Yeah, I know.
However, you can see from this conversation how important the subject is and how unavoidable the issue of commercial insurance is. And if you have a shoe stand, whatever kind of business you plan to do, you need to factor insurance into your strategy and into your budget. And so, listen, Bobby Van Buren, thank you so much for this brief time.
Yeah.
And your contact information will be available, folks. Contact Bobby if you have any questions. If you have a company, I always recommend that you get a second and third opinion on matters like insurance. And you may have an insurance broker now, but it may help you to have Bobby do an analysis of your business and show you some options. We often get into a habit of paying people year after year for the same service and not look up to see if we have a better option. So this is the DFREE Wealth Lab, and my guest has been Bobby Van Buren. You'll be hearing from him again because he's going to be a frequent guest on this Wealth Lab podcast. So thanks, Bobby.
Call me anytime. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bless you.